What's up, everybody? It's Grim, and you're watching Thrash Maniac 99 Wrestling, Gaming, and Metal videos. Hit the real intro.
What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back to yet another episode of What Else Came Out This Week, part of the Mosh Pit Review Show, where I am here to talk about additional albums that came out in a previous week and give my quick, short impressions about it. And this week we got three heavyweights: Dream Theater, Candlemass, and Rhapsody of Fire. And we're going to kickstart this with the album Distance Over Time by Dream Theater. Now, this is the first album Dream Theater has released since The Astonishing in 2016, in which I actually have a version of it on CD. Now, granted, The Astonishing is one of the more forgettable albums of Dream Theater's discography, but I still think it's a decent album. I just haven't really returned to it very much, and I think that was a common complaint some people had about that album, was how not a lot of people returned back to it after it was released. But with Distance Over Time, they decided to pretty much kind of trim the fat on everything they were doing prior and try and simplify things a little bit, but still being progressive as hell. After all, Dream Theater is one of the reigning kings of progressive metal and one of the forefathers of modern progressive metal in the late 80s, early 90s time period. So with Distance Over Time, yeah, you definitely get a little more of a hard rock edge, but still retaining the heaviness and the virtuosity the band has been predominantly known for throughout their entire careers. So, top to bottom, the album was pretty fun to listen to. However, my one complaint I would have about the album is that it doesn't have quite as good of a memory to it as some of their previous work in the past. Then again, that's just one man's opinion, and so for that, I am actually giving this album 26 out of 40. It's still a solid release to definitely get into, especially if you were turned off by the band after The Astonishing. I definitely recommend you guys give this a try and see what you think. Now let's get into Candlemass, The Door to Doom. Well, the word doom is being used a little bit loosely. Now, Candlemass, of course, legends in the doom metal genre, formed in '84 out of Sweden, and Candlemass is one of the few doom bands I really do like as far as their early stuff. Like, their first 2-3 albums are classic doom metal albums. Speaking of the first album, Epicus Doomicus Metallicus, this album is the first one since Epicus came out to feature original vocalist Johan Lundqvist. And is this Epicus Doomicus Metallicus Part 2? No. If anything, this is more of a traditional heavy metal album than a doom metal album. It's basically traditional heavy metal with doom parts, as opposed to overwhelmingly being a doom metal album. And in fact, the highlight of this album would be the song Astralis, the Great Octopus, which features guitar solos from Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath, which is a perfect fit considering Sabbath are the inventors of not only metal, but doom as well. So, overall, with Door to Doom by Candlemass, I would give this a 25 out of 40. Wasn't quite as doom-laden as I probably would have liked it to have been. It sounded more like an old-school heavy metal album, which, nothing wrong with that, but for a band like Candlemass, who had been known to create slow, prodding, heavy doom, that's more or less what I wanted to hear out of this album. Didn't get too much of that. That's just one man's opinion, of course. But now let's get into The Eighth Mountain by Rhapsody of Fire. Now, similar to quite a few bands I've talked about for albums this year, Rhapsody of Fire is a band that's always been out of the radar for me, even though I knew who they were, and they were a huge pillar in symphonic metal and power metal music. And also, Fabio Leone, the former vocalist, is a phenomenal vocalist. However, he's not in the band anymore, as my focus off of you. And there it goes again. So, with this album being the first one I heard, I was extremely impressed. The solos, the melodies, and even some of the riffs, very well put together. The symphonic aspect is quite prominent. Quite a few songs on here are probably going to end up, if I ever decide to do a top 10 songs of the year list, which I don't think I will do, there's a couple of songs on here that are very, very, very good, like Warrior Heart, among others. In fact, let me actually go back to the track list to point out which ones, because I can't quite remember off the top of my head. Yeah, Warrior Heart, March Against the Tyrant was an epic tune. The Wind, the Rain, and the Moon, which was a ballad song, it was really well done. Now, the closing track, Tales of a Hero's Fate, which was the longest song of the album at nearly 11 minutes, was still very good, but more going to be remembered for the final 2 minutes with narration from the late, great Christopher Lee. And it was eerie, and I started getting goosebumps, no lie. I was getting goosebumps listening to Christopher Lee do narration for the end of that song, and it was so epic, it was so cool. So overall, with Rhapsody of Fire's The Eighth Mountain, this is another contender for Album of the Year. I give this one a 36 out of 40. I was very impressed with hearing this band for the first time, and with this being a new album of theirs, wow, this band is very, very competent, very talented for a symphonic power metal band. So that pretty much does it for this episode of What Else Came Out This Week. I know this came out a little bit later than I wanted it to, but after difficulties over the weekend, I had to switch things up. But I will be back tomorrow for my review of the new Queensryche album, The Verdict. Stick around for that. But until then, peace out, and I will see you soon.